let me turn it back, if I may, just a few days. And this was Friday. This wasn't that long ago. That was pre-FU, pre-College World Series. And we're thinking that this is the straw that breaks Billy Napier's back in terms of fan support, because you had Florida commitment Austin Simmons flipped to Ole Miss, and he reclassified for the class of 2023. So Florida not only loses a commitment, but one that might be able to be an elite player. He's a four-star quarterback committed the Gators 2025 recruiting class. He committed on 24 or April the 4th. I'm not exactly sure how he goes from 2025 to 2024. I've never heard of that before. But at the time, we're all thinking to ourselves, that Billy Napier, man, he's really got it off the rails in Gainesville. He just keeps messing up. You had the Jaden Rashada incident where they didn't have money to pay him. Well, maybe, just maybe, there was a reason that Simmons went to Ole Miss. And you have to remember that Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin right now is the island of broken toys. They're taking in whoever they can that might have issues elsewhere, that might want to transfer. So maybe we should look at somebody going to Ole Miss a little bit different. Now we do. Why, Caleb? While I'm at Bonnaroo acting like I'm 25 years old again, and instead of 38, why do we look at this Florida group as suddenly very, very competent and a little bit scary if you're in the SEC East or SEC? Why? Tell me what's happened, sir.
Well, so while you were out yesterday, Jaru and I did a segment on this because Florida over the weekend, after losing that quarterback, picked up 4 commitments over the weekend. All 4 were 4 stars at least across the board, some 5 stars. So that was defensive tackle Nazir Johnson, defensive end Amaris Williams, tight end Amir Jackson, and linebacker Aaron Childs. Jaru and I spoke yesterday. We're like, this isn't an alarm bell yet, because what it seems like happened was Florida had all their visitors early, and they kind of had, you know how this happens, Dave, in recruiting. Some people get their recruit commitments early. Some people get them late. And Florida just got all their hits that came early. So they made the splash early, and they moved up. But then yesterday came, and they picked up 3 more commitments. Javante Walker, Makai Boyru, I think is how you pronounce his name, and Marcus Maskell. Now, here's the crazy part. This wasn't some sort of Florida getting guys in their backyard. Not one of these players was from Florida. There were 4 from Georgia, 1 from Mississippi, 1 from Maryland, and 1 from North Carolina. So Florida now has a top 3 recruiting class across the country. And I think the haul yesterday makes you start to wonder, did they get their NIL right? Are they building something? Is Billy Napier's attention to detail working? Or, and here's the real question, does what Jaru and I talked about yesterday still stand, which is that they just, the bulk of their recruits all just happened this weekend, and eventually as other schools add commitments, they're going to fade over the few months. So that becomes a big question, Dave.
Okay, so there's that level where you shouldn't be concerned if you're Tennessee, South Carolina, or Georgia, right?
Right.
That it just happened to fall. They made it fall that way. These guys were silent commitments. This happens all the time. I've seen Tennessee pick up 8 commitments in a weekend, but we really knew about 4 or 5 of them, right? And this was, Philip Fulmer used to like to set these things up. But so there's that level. You shouldn't be concerned at all. You should be a little bit concerned, because even though I've got questions about Billy Napier as a head coach, as a game manager, as an offensive or defensive mind, I don't know what he does great at this point. Maybe you can fill me in, Caleb, but I think every coach needs to do something great. Like Josh Heupel has offense, Nick Saban coaches defensive backs. I could go on and on and on, but everybody does something great. Steve Spurrier, coach quarterbacks, coach scheme. I don't know what Billy Napier does great, so you might want to look at his history and help me out there. But
he has no consistent strength whatsoever.
Right. So he's not uber awesome at something. I think every great coach is uber awesome at something. Okay,
And
every single one.
unless you're a great staff hire. Dabo Swinney's not uber awesome at anything either, but he hires well.
Rare exception, I'll give you that. So with Billy Napier, well, you could argue that Dabo Swinney's good with wide receivers. He played wide receiver.
That is true, and he was the receivers coach for years, and he turned Clemson into wide receiver U. But
yeah,
but does wide receivers coach matter that much?
I think
does being a specialist in that matter too much? I think
there's something to be said for getting off the line and showing people different looks in a passing tree. I think there's something to be said for that. Maybe more than you, but nevertheless, I think most coaches do something great. Okay, Bill Belichick evaluates talent great. I mean, you look at the guy he picked up from Chattanooga, and he's an instant starter in the NFL at center. Okay, so and that was a reach. Everybody thought. He picked up Tom Brady. But anyway, everybody does something great. I don't know what Billy Napier does great. So there are 3 levels of Napier. 1, he got damn lucky. Okay, that just happened over the weekend. He got really, really lucky. And the second tier is he's Ron Zook, okay, which is a great recruiter, which you don't want him to be either, because then when he gets fired, somebody takes over and they have immediate success because they've got talent. I think Tennessee kind of not great recruiter, but Tennessee's benefited off Jeremy Pruitt's guys. Not great recruiter, good recruiter, because he was paying people. And then the third tier is that suddenly we have absolutely misjudged Billy Napier, and he is going to be a very good coach at Florida. If I made you choose between the 3, as a matter of fact, let's make it today's tough question. Did he get lucky? Is he good? Or do we have him underrated? Here we go. Today's tough question brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com. Integrity matters.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
Over 50 years in experience, integrity matters. Cityheatingandair.com. And with cityheatandair.com, you are able to know that your unit may just need a part, or Freon may not need to be replaced altogether. So there are your 3 options. I want to hear them on the message board. By the way, Freddie Mercury and Queen would be fantastic at Neyland Stadium. I love this going on, and keep rolling on that. All right. And by the way, Guns N' Roses and Metallica were supposed to play Neyland Stadium, but Axl Rose is an idiot. But anyway, Caleb, and he set some Toronto Coliseum on fire. But anyway, I give you those 3 options: lucky, good, great. What do you say?
Okay, lucky. And I'll tell you exactly why it's lucky. And I don't mean lucky like these commitments fell into his lap. I think these were guys Florida's targeting. Here's my theory, Dave. I think Billy Napier had exactly what you said, a lot of silent commitments. And I think what happened was last week, if you remember, Florida, we were laughing at Florida. They lost a player to Georgia, a decommit and a flip, and he probably knew they were about to lose this Ole Miss, this flip to Ole Miss. I think he kind of pushed some of those silent commitments to go ahead and publicly commit, because if they don't publicly commit, him trying to recruit other players long term hurts, because the narrative of what's happening to him now in Florida, that affects the players that he's trying to target down the road. And I think to save face, I think he nudged a lot of his silent commitments to go ahead and publicly commit so he could shift the narrative while trying to recruit these other guys. That's what I think happened.
Here are my thoughts. I think he's good, but I don't think he's high on the good scale. Ron Zook was a very good recruiter. Would you agree with that?
An amazing recruiter. I'm suspicious of some of his recruiting too, but what he did at Illinois,
Well, sure. I think he's a good recruiter, and maybe a very good recruiter. I think that you had a lot of the collectives in Gainesville get in his way. I think the Austin Simmons flip to Ole Miss and him having a response to that is detail-oriented, which we heard so much at SEC Media Days about Billy Napier. So I'm going to say he's good and solid good. but I have no reason based off Anthony Richardson's lack of development last year to think he's great. So I don't think you're scared at all by what Billy Napier did in this past weekend. But I'll tell you what, I never thought – I thought Charlie Strong was a very good defensive coordinator at Florida. Did I think he was elite? No, I didn't. I didn't. The Who and the Police, very good votes. We could put together a music festival, the Neyland Music Festival. We're going to do this. I don't think he's I don't think he can be considered a buffoon, which is quite frankly what I had him. And he may be very good. He may be Zook-like eventually in his recruiting, and that would hand it off to somebody who is a better coach. I have trouble believing he is great because that entire team seemed too spastic last year and lacked direction. So it's either a total goofball, it's good in that he's a recruiter, or it's very good in that he's a great head coach. I don't see that he's a great head coach at all.
And I don't think he's hired coaches that are just that schematically amazing. I mean, Rob Sale, his offensive coordinator, Dave was his offensive coordinator at Louisiana, and his whole career as an offensive line coach. No disrespect to offensive line coaches, Philip Fulmer, Jim Chaney, they can know offense, but when is the last offensive line coach who you heard as an offensive coordinator created an offensive scheme that was ahead of the curve? They don't do that.
No. It's once every 10, 15 years, isn't it?
I think it's once every 10, 15 years where an offensive line coach just becomes a coordinator. I'm talking about not just becoming a coordinator, but becoming a coordinator and developing a scheme that you would trust their scheme over someone else's scheme. I've never heard of an offensive line coach that they may be a good offensive coordinator, but that has an ahead-of-the-curve scheme. You know, Fulmer ran a standard pro-style offense at Tennessee. Jim Chaney ran a standard pro-style offense at Tennessee. I mean, have you ever heard of an offensive coordinator that invented Josh Heupel's offense or the RPOs or the fun and gun with Spurrier? No, they all run standard pro-style offenses, right?
Yes. Now, I think there are two things going on with offensive line coaches. I don't think they have the particular desire to be a coordinator. I think they like the man-on-man type of coaching that they do. So I don't think there's that desire. And also, to be real honest with you, most offensive line coaches I've met are not the brightest in the world. I mean, Philip Fulmer is very bright, but a lot of the offensive line coaches that I have met over the years have not been incredibly bright. Sam Pittman was an offensive line coach. I think he's bright, but give me an offensive line coach that you can recall that is smarter than that. It's just smarter than Philip Fulmer, smarter than Sam Pittman. That is another level of intelligence. I think you have to coach quarterbacks. I think you have to, in this day and age, understand passing trees and the box. And I don't think a lot of coaches, offensive line coaches, do that. I also believe that those coaches don't have necessarily that desire to become a head coach. By the way, we're putting together a hell of a concert. If you look at, we've got all these albums. So nobody said Guns N' Roses yet, but all these albums came out within a week of each other. It was Red Hot Chili Peppers, Sugar Sex Magic, whatever it's called. And then it was Nirvana came out. And then you had Pearl Jam 10. You had the GNR Use Your Illusions album. That's our Neyland show. Those 5 albums that came out.
The Social Security checks would pay for that show.
Mr. Jones said, and the Black Album by Metallica came out. So Mr. Jones said, I said GNR. Oh, Rocky Top Tom says guns equal garbage. I don't know. If you listen to the lyrics, they're pretty darn good. Okay, so with Florida, you should be more worried about Florida or South Carolina after what we've seen this past weekend.
Oh, we talked about this yesterday, funny enough, and we both still agreed Florida because Shane Beamer has the same problem Billy Napier has. Shane Beamer doesn't specialize in anything, and I have less faith in Shane Beamer's hires. I don't think Shane Beamer made the smartest hires for coordinator this year. I'll leave it at that.
I'm not crazy about his staff in general, so I'll give you Florida, but I think it's a lot closer than than everybody thought going into last year, because Shane Beamer's doing the social media stuff. You have um, you have Billy Napier, who's Mr. Detail oriented, and suddenly he's kind of not.